books, we just didn't really have anybody come in and take them. So they were sitting there, they were ready for free, but, you know,
You
it's,
can give them to me. I'll read any level.
can we get some of them shops still in?
But I think that's why sitting on this panel and having people come is so important. Because if, I mean, I have boys, so granted, like, my life is superheroes and capes and underwear on top of our pants. But, you know, life is messy, and if we're not taking our kids there so that they can experience, like my kids, we were stood at Halloween Comic Fest, and I said, these are all the comics they had. All the little kids ones were more closer to the bottom, and so I said, you know, pick out the ones you want. There's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other ones, and he's like, well, okay, I'll try this one, I'll try this one. So it's a matter of putting our kids in reach of those. I mean, obviously you don't have to pay for them, but Free Comic Book Day in May and Halloween Comic Fest, put your kids in that shop. Because let's be honest, the demographic for comic books are generally adult males without children. So you're not reaching kids that way. But there's a select few of us who are saying, this is the way for it to be. A lot of women readers
Which is the highest growing demographic.
starting to take their kids to the comic book shops and starting to put the comics in the hands of their kids. So, you know, if we continue to look at our kids as, you know, people who need this forum, then, or this medium, then, you know, we'll start taking it over. But I think if we don't, it's kind of like if you don't know it's there, nobody's coming to get it, they'll stop making it. So if we're not going to get it, then I want them to stop making it. So take your kids to Free Comic Book Day.
For 28.
So 28 years. Can you tell us how children have kind of changed in that time? Because that's what we're talking about. Kids have been influenced.
Well, it's really interesting because it is a split world with Dragon Con. There is some inappropriate cosplaying that goes on at Dragon Con, but then Dragon Con consists of 3,000 hours of programs. There's at least 20 panels going on per hour over a 4-day/5-day event. So, of course, amongst all of that programming, you're going to have children-related program, which has become pretty massive. And those that are associated or know Dragon Con very well know when to bring the kids and when not to bring the kids, basically. But it has contributed at least $100,000 a year to charitable contributions. Our charity last year, I think, was a literacy charity. And so basically, you raise $100,000, and Dragon Con literally matches that with another $100,000. So it's more than that. But the way it grew from the early days of basically being, you know, a number of different comic-related, I mean, the term Comic-Con didn't even exist back then. You know, it was Atlanta Fantasy Fair, there was Magnum Opus, I don't know if anybody was familiar with that convention. Basically, once they merged, they realized, okay, this is the crowd that we want coming to our convention. Eventually, as the ownership, you know, came in over the years, they said, hey, we want more kids coming to our convention. They have a parade every Saturday morning, not every Saturday morning, the Saturday of the convention at 10 a.m., which is literally the city of Atlanta's biggest parade of any sort anywhere. And the participants, which is largely children in those parades, is just so beneficial to the introduction of comics heroes, ///. So they want to concentrate more on contributing children-related program, you know, for kids there at Dragon Con. I'm really, really proud of what Dragon Con has done over the years. And that's Dragon Con. I'd love to see Dragon Con go that way, but another story. But in terms of educating the kids, in terms of their literacy, superheroes, I'm a big fan of comprehension, and that's why I'm leaning more on reading books, because if you can't understand what you're reading, you're not going to come up with any sort of visuals or any sort of understanding of what it is that's actually happening on those pages. So I agree 100% with what a lot of people have said on the panels in terms of comics being that visual component to education, which is what Dragon Con does in terms of inviting tons and tons and tons of kids to basically come and say, hey, come look at us, come see us. Hey, guess who we are, guess where we're from. You know, there are a lot of anime fans out here. and I grew up with anime, but another era of anime, probably Bubblegum Crisis and before, you know, things like that. But the anime that we have today that I feel is a form of education as well. There is some levels of anime that you don't want to introduce your children to because Japan is just so adult-oriented, period. They're just that way. So everything that's been said in this room has just been 100% positive, and I think those that do have children should always open their world to comics, to their kids, because all these folks are absolutely right. The visual concept of this does help bring about a certain number of disabilities, such as dyslexia and things that they can't comprehend in the written word. So I'm a total big fan of that, and I encourage, you know, if you guys have never been to Dragon Con and you don't know what you're missing, but then someday you will come and you'll say, oh yeah, they got a big children's programming.
I got a question.
Hold on 1 second. We're in our last minute. Now this is how we're gonna do it, because this is Indie Takeover. We don't have to leave the room. We have the next panel. But I do want to give, because it's Nicole's panel, her to have the last official word on the actual panel. And then we'll take any questions or anything. We'll keep it going, but I do want you to get the official last word.
The official last word.
The official last word of the panel.
So, having listened to everybody on the panel and the different viewpoints, if you are a comic reader, keep reading. If you know somebody who's not, turn them on to it. If you know a teacher, put comic books in their hands. Because a lot of it comes down to potentially us not knowing how to get a lot of free stuff. Because an education free is wonderful. Like, teachers spend an average of $600 a year of their own paycheck in their classrooms. That ranges from reading materials for each child to incentives to whatever, supplies. So it means that if you have a comic book shop that you frequent, go there, ask for free stuff, take it to a teacher. If you know teachers, turn them on to different stuff that's going on in the comic world. If you have kids, keep them reading comics. It's just simple. It's like I said at the beginning of the panel, comics are the gateway. So many people that I've talked to have said that comic books started them, but they didn't just stop with comic books. They started reading really intellectually stimulating novels without pictures. So it's not like it stops there. It continues. So it's like opening the floodgates. Open the floodgates of reading for our kids.
Well, if you want to get really advanced reading, indie comics are obviously the way to go, because they tell stories like no others. I'm not biased at all, but you did have a question, so now we're in overtime. So if anyone did have to do anything, by all means, you guys can leave the panel, but we're going to stay and still answer some questions, so go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to roll a ticket too.
Yeah.
With your 35-year career in the
Makes me
comic,
old, doesn't it?
in the comic convention, panels like this, would you like to see more of?
Well, panels are necessary for every con. You can't just go, and I'm sorry, I worked for MegaCon for a very, very long time, but the reason I no longer work for MegaCon because I'm seeing what's basically called the big box conventions. You know, you got your Walmarts and you got your Neiman Marcus's. And Neiman Marcus's sell quality stuff. Walmart's, well, sell stuff you need or want. Big box shows sell stuff you need or want. They become less personal. I think the panels are extremely important, especially something like this. We need to see a lot more of things like this than just walking around a dealer's room trying to find something to buy. You know,
Stolen art.
we need to sit in a room and become educated on what it is we love and why we love it in the first place. Not just say, well, I got that poster already, I don't need to buy that again, and so on and so on and so on. So this is the heart, soul, and blood, literally, well maybe not the blood, but the heart and soul of conventions around the world. You know, so this is necessary, yes.
And it's also about, I mean, credit to Nicole, it's about educating parents. And I don't think parents understand how powerful comics can be.
No, they don't.
How it can open up new worlds to your children. I think too often we're worried about dumbing down our kids instead of rising our kids up. You can't dumb down a kid. That's not a thing. Dumbing down a kid doesn't happen. Anything you would let them experience, they've learned something. You learn from doing and seeing. You learn nothing from doing nothing. So I think that what you're doing is rising also the intelligence level of parents. So I do think that we're in a crisis where parents stop being parents recently. I think we expect apps to do our parenting, and that's not how it works.
It's hard, Ron.
You put a 16-year-old on the road, you have issues.
I mean, I think part of,
Did you have a
part
question?
of educating,
Oh, yeah.
educating parents.
What was your question, sir?
Just gotta go to cosplay.
Oh, we'll get to that.
My question was like, for like older comics that like, cause like I remember some of the first comics I used to read, they were like the original Avengers, like the Silver Age.
Yeah.
The original Fantastic Four. Do you think that you could still like give a kid like those comics? Cause I know you like gave your sixth graders like God Loves Man Kills.
That's a great question.
And
Yes.
like, I wonder if it would still like apply, like even though these comics are like years and years old. it would
Let me
still
answer that
apply
quickly,
more
because I know you have to go. Does the Bible still count?
Yeah.
So it never
Great
grows-
pieces of work never stop being
Right.
great.
Yeah, it never
They
grows old.
continue to be great, and we can just pass them on to a next generation, which is you. Thank you for reading comic books and seeing the past.
Good luck with cosplay.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about introducing people to comics. You know, with the more modern storylines, you've got any number of reboots and alternate universes going on. How, from a narrative perspective, do you determine where to start someone? Is there a method you can use, or is it all case by case?
Okay, you guys are gonna hate me.
No, never mind.
This is one of the sole reasons why I stopped reading comics. I literally stopped reading comics probably 15 years ago. And the reason for that is I can't keep up anymore. Not only just the expense alone, okay, but the fact of what you gotta pay to find out what the hell's going on. The New 52, never read any of it because no way, no. I come from old school. I know what Superman is and what Superman is affected to. Oh, what, a new kryptonite? I don't care. You know, the expense, the fact that they're spinning my head around to the point where I'm no longer interested just really took me away from literally reading. Eventually I'll pick up something that looks interesting, or I'll see something on the internet and say, oh, look at Batman these days, which honestly I did for the first time today in that lobby. I literally pulled it up because I saw it on the news and said,
That might be my fault. That might be my fault. He was in the panel when I mentioned
I
it.
think it was.
I told her how to
That's right.
Google it.
That's why I did. I was sitting in that chair right now because I knew it existed. Did I care?
Why am the devil?
You know, and anybody who did care, why? I mean, it's kind of restrained. It's, oh yeah, oh my God, Batman, yeah, let's see. And I'm kind of like, ah. And what I do, I sit right there in that chair when he mentions it right here, and I Google the heck out of it, and I wish I had. You know, not
I
that
just
it-
wanted to know how I sized up.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I just want to know how I sized up to the man.
I did not stop reading comic books because it got uninteresting or there was bad writing. None of that exists. If anything, it's gotten better. There's some great stories, there's some bad stories, yada, yada, yada. It just kept hopping around too much. And I got tired of that. I'm like, I can't, you know, I'd have to spend a lot of money to see Spider-Pig. When the hell did that happen?
Well, that's back in the 80s.
But to be honest, here's the real answer.
Oh, that's right.
No, the real answer is this. You asking that question is the wrong question. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to give them your experience. They need to find their own
Yeah, that's
experience.
true. That's
It really is, and it sucks, right? Because I want people to read my comics.
Of
I want
course.
them to read, not the ones I'm writing, but I want them to like the stuff that I like. But the reality is that's not the case, right? Spider-Gwen sells tons of copies. I will never relate to Spider-Gwen because Gwen Stacy's dead. But it does relate to
Agreed.
brings people.
I'm with you on that.
But this is
I'm
not
with you
like,
on that.
I know it's all thing universe, blah, 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 whatever. But the reality is,
700 issues ago.
yeah, what you're gonna do is give them, you know, the gateway, whatever that happens to be. You know, there's greats for everybody, you know. Batman, you know, you wanna go Killing Joke or, you know, Long Halloween. For Spider-Man, you wanna go, The Death of Gwen Stacy, you wanna go any of the shootings he's run, you know. There's all these powerful runs that people know, First Appearance of Venom, or, you know, all that stuff is great, but really, just turn them onto a character, explain the character to them, and let them explore, because there's so many options, there's so many
It is.
variables of doing it, that you are cheapening in them, and they may teach you something, right? I remember I got my friend John Constantine, I showed him the big stuff, and he showed me some crappy stuff, but I read it, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll give it a time. The minute it stopped saying Hellblazer on the cover, I stopped reading it. When it said Constantine, I was out. But really, it's the experience that they need to have, so bringing a reader is wherever they want to start. Just grab the latest reboot and let them start.
You know
I know
what?
it sounds weird.
In your respect, though, what gets people into comics, try to introduce them into comics, one thing that I've learned in my decades of this is meeting people like this.
Yeah.
Okay, if I have some sort of relation now, I didn't know anything about you guys' books.
Sure.
But you don't think I'm gonna now go Google, search, whatever? It's, you come to shows like this, you sit in the panels like this, you listen to people like this, you tap into their brains like this, and what are you gonna go home with? A lot more. You're gonna want more from that. So if you wanted to introduce anyone, I would start out with, well, I watch these guys interact, and you should try blah, blah, blah because of what they said, blah, 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 blah. You know, rather than saying, you know, well, I'm gonna pick up Ant-Man and maybe I'll start with Ant-Man and follow that back. But no, we got new writers up here, new indie folks up here that are writing, obviously, quality stuff. I'll give you a grade. But, you know, but I would experiment and explore and see, you know, where these guys come from and how they got into the game.
That's what I was gonna say, you should, you said if you know them, so you obviously already know this person. I have a lot of times people who know nothing about comics, they'll mention something they like, and I'll be like, oh, you know what you would really like? You should try Chew, or you should try Saga, because Saga's fantastic, and it's not something you would ever think of reading. And they can catch up in, you know, a week. There's 54 issues, you can catch up in a week. It's great.
I have a very simple way to do it.
Yeah,
This is gonna be, hold on, this is gonna be the simplest thing you do. Grab your friend, bring him to a Comic-Con. I swear to God, something is gonna drag them in. They're gonna walk by, they're gonna see a banner that calls their name, and they're gonna wanna know what that banner's about. And I've seen it many times, and I've tabled with many people, and you never know. There are people who don't know what their fandom is until it stares them in their face. There's no simpler way. So if I tell you to do this, you're gonna be like, okay, whatever, dude. But if you walk by and you see David's thing over here, and you go, wait a minute, why is there that one-eyed monster? I remember that from my childhood. I remember that being one-eyed. What's that about? You're gonna read that. You're not gonna read what you're told to read. Schools know all about that.
I think my biggest thing was, at one point I said I'd never buy a black and white comic book. I will never buy a black and white comic book.
So you don't like Walking Dead?
And then,
We get it.
and then when I was in 11th grade, actually I was in 10th grade, a friend of mine gave me a copy of the Savage Sword Conan.
Oh, yeah.
I collected that from that point until it ended. Over 200 issues of the Savage Sword of Conan. I mean, it changed my whole perspective as far as comics, because I always thought of superheroes, I always thought of Superman, I always thought of Batman. But here was Conan the Barbarian, the baddest mother walking around, and then the stories that he was involved in. He, as much of a bad guy as we try to make him out to be, his stories had a lot of morality. His stories had a lot of, oh man, I'm gonna be right there with you. I'll give up every superhero comic book I have for Conan the Barbarian.
Bite your tongue.
Look, Barry Windsor Smith, man.
Yeah, I think Turtles started it for me.
Yeah.
I think Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they started out in black and white.
Yeah.
Not starting in comics, but.
No, they did. They started in black and white. I actually really liked them in black and white, by the way. There's a lot of cleverness.
And even when they first colored them, it was red masks and all
Yeah,
that.
it was very simple.
I'm from where they're from. Like I'm from Rochester. They're from Dover, New Hampshire. The sewers in Manhattan. Yeah, right there to the left. It's a Maine. But you get these comics, but black and white and all that. A lot of people, especially with the indie comics, a lot of us have to print in black and white.
Yeah.
Because you can't afford the cover. Because that extra cost, we're already paying $150 a page for artists, for 20 pages, it's ridiculous. There is stuff, I out there, my book out there is black and white, but I have a color version coming, but I challenge for the noir. But black and white, you know, there's stuff that can be said, it's gotta fit the genre, right? You know, if you're doing crime, if you're doing stuff that it fits.
That's why it
it's
works
gotta
for The
work.
Walking Dead.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
Robert Kirkman said he was a huge fan of Hitchcock,
Right.
you know, Psycho, Black and White.
Almost all of his movies were black and white.
Has anyone seen Clerks colored? Clerks colored?
No.
It's horrible.
Really?
It's horrible. They did a colored version of Clerks, and it really ruins it.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Smith, Clerks.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched it, you're missing out. Go watch it. It stands up as one of the best movies of hating to work ever made. I based my life on that mentality of Randall.
And I think something else too, I was a fan of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, same
All
here.
of them.
Yeah. I can name almost every episode, that's how psychotic I am.
What's your favorite? That says a lot about a person. What's your favorite Twilight Zone?
Eye of the Beholder was one.
Ooh, nice one.
Oh God. Help me, it's a cookbook.
Oh, how to prepare human, or no, how to
Serve
serve
man.
man.
The Serve Man.
Yeah, Serve Man, yeah,
Serve
Serve
Man.
Man, yeah.
Also, you remember in the old series Bewitched, who was Bewitch's mother?
Oh.
Agatha.
No, the actress,
No,
right?
you're close enough. Her name was Agnes Moorehead.
Agnes.
What was the most famous Twilight Zone episode with her in it?
Oh, the one with the pigs.
All right, I'll break the ice.
That-
It was called The Invaders.
Okay.
She was an old lady living in
Oh,
a cabin
the ship
in the wilderness,
crashed into the
and she was
roof.
being invaded by a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want the punchline? You want the punchline? The damn saucer was from Earth. She was the alien.
I was over there.
I remember that.
Yeah, they were this tall. They were this tall.
Yeah.
You know, and they were stabbing her, and she was trying to beat off these invaders. You're thinking, this woman's in New Mexico or something like that. Hell no, that's another planet. That was okay. Yeah, so Twilight Zone, yes.
Any other questions, guys? Go for it.
So, there's always a take on indie comics being like a kind of wild, wild west for storytelling. And there's been like a surge of an argument nowadays about how diversity is ruining comics. Like, what is your take like on?
Just smack them. Anyone who's looking at you, just smack them.
You should have been in the last.
Yeah, he was.
Is this ruining it for you? Is this ruining it for you? No, look, what that is, that's just people voicing their angry opinion because the internet has empowered people to have an opinion. If you don't want to buy a book, don't buy a book. Don't bother me about your opinions. I don't bother you about my opinions. I don't talk about politics, and I think the problem is that everyone wants to talk about things. You have a great way to show what you support with your money. The rest is all hot air. It's just people trying to be heard. And that's the truth, because diversity's not
They're the
going
loudest,
away.
they're not the largest group.
And here's why diversity's not going away. The people who make diversity are still alive.
Yeah.
They would all have to die for diversity to go away, and not everyone's dying. We're not going to be all one color, unless the Matrix is true. But that's about 200 years from now.
Yeah, he does. But he's absolutely right. I'm a very opinionated person. So are you. So is he. So is she. Everybody's very opinionated. But when you try to act on your own opinions, when you literally try to convince other people to think the way you think, okay, you don't deserve that to be in the gene pool. Simple. Because you can't convince me not to read his stuff. Why? Because you hated it? Well, how about you let me judge for myself, and I'll let you know whether it sucks or not. Oh, you know what? I probably won't let you know whether it sucks or not, because then that would be my opinion, it wouldn't. And I would try to be convincing you not to go and buy his stuff because his stuff sucks. That makes absolutely no total sense. Judge for yourself has always been my banner. I don't care what anybody says, judge for yourself. Don't become part of the mob mentality, and that's our problem.
And here's also something, read. Before you give an opinion on anything, read or watch it. Too many idiots out there are giving opinions because they think they know what a book is. Because they might have saw the title and not liked the title and decided that they knew what it was about.
Oh, no, I can't read that, man. It's about
Which,
Nazi
that's exactly what those
Germans.
guys are
Well,
doing.
and
Yeah.
just because.
They don't read it, they just.
They
go out
just
immediately
hear.
bad.
Like the famous cover about the Ask Me About My Feminist Agenda was her mocking people who were making fun of her book, and they didn't get that, and they got upset about it. Well, she's telling the truth now, this is about our feminist agenda.
Amazing.
And if anyone knows what a feminist is, it's a person who wants equality for everyone. That's all a feminist
Yes,
is.
we're not men haters, thank you.
No, that's men haters who are feminists.
That's what I
There's
do.
a difference.
That's right. There's a difference.
I think our perspective is our truth. So in order for you to change my perspective, I have to be willing to listen. So, and this is a lot of what we talk about, like I have taught in the most diverse schools, I taught kids that don't look like me. So at the end of the day, sometimes you can't have that conversation about that diversity piece. So you almost have to go out and read about it. You have to go out and see it from somebody else's perspective. And the worst part about it is that we are not, as humans, capable of having conversations that enlighten. We want to just prove our point.
Right.
So if I say something that was wrong or crass or whatever, and it wasn't PC, and somebody doesn't call me out on it, I will continue to do that. But if you call me out on it, I get my feelings hurt, so then I'm all in my feelings and I can't realize that by me making that judgment, I hurt yours. So it's this big cyclical thing of we just refuse to understand. Go out and read the book and decide. Now, the first couple of books I read was Strangers in Paradise, J.O. Barnes the Crow, and Tarot. So, most people right there, like, if you know anything about Strangers in Paradise, if you know anything about J.O. Barnes the Crow, if you know anything about Tarot, I mean, look at how dark all three of those books tend to become. And then, think about me as a person. You could take your entire idea about me based on what I read. That doesn't mean anything about who I am. It just means that I'm enlightened enough to understand the darker side of it. Doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with it. It doesn't mean that the lifestyle's for me. It just means that I'm understanding enough to at least try.
No, you suck. Those books suck.
The only thing I gotta say to
That's
caveat,
okay, but Strangers in Paradise is back, so.
there's a big problem with diversity, with the word diversity in comics, because you're allowed to have an opinion. For instance, I was anti, a black woman torch. Not because I had a problem with being black, I had a problem that he had a white sister. Like, that was more my problem. I was like,
Confused.
right, I was more confused. I'm like, what are you doing?
She was adopted, kid. She was adopted.
Right, she was adopted, but she isn't in the comics. But the problem is, we've taken it to the point of, because we have an opinion of that, you're allowed, if you know the source material, you're allowed to have an opinion about it. And I think that we're getting to the point right now in comics where we're afraid to even have that opinion.
Well,
And that's okay. It's okay to say, I don't like Lady Thor. But it's not okay to say, I don't like Lady Thor because she's a woman. Does that make sense? I don't like Lady Thor because I like...
You're talking about interjection. People deciding your opinion for you. Like, you said that because you hate black people, is what you're saying, because you're that.
What?
That's what happened. But that's what you're saying. It's the fact that we're putting words into people.
And Magneto's gay, by the way.
Yeah, he is. No, it's the statements, and it's true. Anyone making a statement now has that statement twisted to fit whatever agenda they're trying to push. Because it's not, like the people, I don't like diversity. Why don't you like diversity? No one asked that question. Why don't you like the comments on diversity? Well, I don't like them talking about feminist views. What feminist views don't you like? You'll hear silence 90% of the time. So they don't even know what they're talking about. They found one thing to fire at the other side. That's what he's saying. Like, we can't have that adulthood. Like, I don't like the fact that they turn certain characters different. I don't like when they change hair color on characters. Because comics are so important to me. I just want that representation. I love
continuity all over.
Yeah, like, I want to see Wolverine. I want Logan to be Wolverine. If you put one of my favorite actors who is Spanish as Wolverine, I don't know if I would like it as much because he's Canadian.
And
I want to hear that Canuck thing.
And the major point is they voice it on social media because they're looking for solidarity. If they get solidarity, they'll find out that, oh my God, my point was relevant. Here,
Three crazy
I'm
people.
right, guys, I'm right. Let's take them down, burn down the castle. That's how
It's
I
the echo
like
chamber of stuff about diversity.
Diversity.
If your friends are echo chambers.
Panel, as far as diversity is concerned, a lack of diversity is learned behavior.
Yep.
Because when we are growing up, we don't know anything about color. We don't know anything.
You don't know the difference.
I use the example of me.
You're black.
I had some friends. I have a lot of friends that were in comic books, both black and white. We didn't know anything about prejudice or racism. We knew comic books. As we got older, we started drifting apart because of what we were learning from other people. The comic books didn't change. We did. So now the comic books that we're reading, if they don't include a racial group, it's because we chose to read a comic book that way. We are choosing these things. We learn to dislike comic books that have this in it for whatever the reason is. When originally, we didn't have a problem with it because we didn't know.
Yeah, I think that if you're uncomfortable with something, you should have that shoved in your face a little bit more,
I
till
think-
you realize why you're uncomfortable about it, because that's a deep
And I
conversation in
think
itself.
our conversations about cultural appropriation and things like that have really changed the way people are allowed to look at things. Like, a little background, Oliver's 4. Oliver, in his beginning of his life, he didn't hear. Everything was muffled. He failed all of his hearing tests. And everything that was visual were the things that mattered to him. So the first superhero movies or the first movies he watched were a lot of the Marvel movies. And he'd talk about Captain America, and he'd talk about whatever, and then he'd talk about Star Wars, and he'd talk about all these other things. This child saw Black Panther. Did it tell you, every time he sees a Black Panther toy, a Black Panther costume, we had an entire discussion about whether he could be Black Panther for Halloween or not. Because I didn't want to offend anyone. But my kid thinks that this guy was amazing. Now, if you have a love for something, why does it matter what color they were?
It only
Isn't
matters to
it-
the people who want it to matter.
Isn't it?
I mean,
I can understand
such
this.
a complicated
I know it's a
topic.
very, it's a very,
He could still be Black Panther. I don't see any problem as a black man with him being Black Panther because Black Panther wore a mask. But the moment you want him to look like T'Chaka, then that's gonna be a problem.
well,
I think
Yes.
but see, he's not gonna look like T'Challa.
What about the
because-
cage?
Because he can't.
T'Chaka, that's all.
But to tell him that he can't dress up like somebody because he values things.
Yeah.
I am an eighth Native American. I'm an eighth Cherokee. And when I was a child, my most favorite things, like my most favorite Halloween costume, was an Indian princess. Native American princess. First People's princess, whatever. But, and I think about it now and I'm like, because I look this way, I am somehow unable to be that, but I am that. Like, part of me is that, it's just because I don't look that way.
Well, that's letting people determine who you are.
I embody the soul of that. If he embodies everything that Black Panther stands for, that's what it should be. And that's only one, I mean, that's only one example. And that's the one that I use because he loves him so much. How many times I've seen that movie?
You just gotta be willing to upset people sometimes, as long as, it's like he said, there's a line.
There's
There's a line before you upset
I
someone.
would not put makeup on him.
Yes,
Well,
that's the
To
one.
make
that's
him-
where the line will be
that's-
drawn, but for
you're
him to be
learning
dressed as
line.
Black Panther is fine. I don't see
Megan Keller.
any reason
But-
why he cannot dress.
No, but what she's saying is that even people, there was a white girl who dressed as Momoa,
Yeah.
or what was the
And
character's
they
name?
tore her,
From-
And they ripped her apart.
Moana, they tore her apart.
And for no reason. I mean, you are
Girl
fit.
dressed as Tiana,
But
because
that's,
Tiana was her
that's why
favorite
everyone
character.
keeps talking about being PC. We have to stop worrying about being PC and being Mac from now on.
And
Yeah.
stop
But
being an ass about things. I mean, let's stop being an ass about things.
Yeah,
Let's just talk about it.
he's a
like,
kid. He wants
honestly.
to be that. Let him be a kid.
But we said it's
He should
a,
be allowed to because
he's
he
being mad.
feels connected to that
He's
character.
expressing feelings.
When I tell him to stop feeling connected to that character, I feel like I would take away something that he would be learning.
Yeah,
Like, because it's not just the mask.
because you're telling me it's not for him.
He embodied that. I mean,
Dangerous.
but until we
He was
fix
amazing
it on the
man.
core of where it came from, like Black Panther is primarily 97% of it is written by black people. And the other 3% was a guy who was white who changed his name to like some black name, I don't remember who it was. But it's true, research it, who wrote Black Panther, was a white guy who had to change his name to like more native black from Africa name. Even Doctor Who, like, it even affects a white thing. There is not a person who's not from England who's ever written Doctor Who in any medium.
You know, humor.
So it goes all the way, like, it goes both directions. It's
We
okay.
just all need to start accepting each other a lot more and stop putting boundaries on each other. And stop telling people who you can and can't be, especially with children. If he likes Black Panther, let him rock Black Panther. Because that's an expression of fandom. There's nothing more important than expressing fandom. If a child wants to change how they look, to look like another culture, you have to have a conversation with them and explain how maybe that could be offensive to someone by doing that. Maybe this is who you are, don't be ashamed of who you are. I think that's the more important message. You can dress like that, but by doing something that would alter how you look, you might be insulting another
I think
culture.
it really runs deep and deeper. I just think that if, you know, those individuals who want to pursue that course are willing to accept and take the consequences, that's mainly up to them. But also the realization that there will be consequences. It's a no-brainer. And if you want to subject your child to that kind, there's enough bullying as it is. There's just too much bullying, period. But to add on top of the pile, if it was my child, it would, well, I'm not white, but if I was white and it was my child, I would ask him, dude, I'm sorry. You know, it's just, I know you got more favorites out there. Just pick another one.
Right.
But in terms of costume
That
Black
was-
Panther,
I mean-
I see no problem as a
And
black
that was-
individual with that.
And that's
you
the
know?
conversation I have to have with the 4-year-old in the costume store.
Sure.
And he cries because all he really wanted to do was wear all the really cool stuff that Black Panther had. Like, you know,
Which, you know, I said adults are hypocrites. We say things like, emulation is the highest form of flattery. When you emulate something, you are actually flattering.
Right.
And then we turn around and tell a kid, but you can't dress up as Black Panther.
Right.
It's a black character.
Right.
And then the reverse, you would never say that to a black kid about a white character.
Exactly.
You can't say that because then you're completely destroying what we're trying to say, that it's okay to be anyone.
Right, and it's, unfortunately, we're outnumbered by the number of people who feel offended by it. If he went into blackface and he came to a party at my house, I'm not offended, but I understand the folks that would be, so it puts me into another mindset. It's like, you shouldn't do that, kid. I'm basically saying to the child as an educational thing and not like, that's wrong, how dare you, how dare you. It doesn't go that direction. It goes into the direction of preserving the sanctity, and I mean, kids are, you know, they're sponges and they're, you know, pure and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it's us parents and adults who are telling our children what is right and what is wrong based on their own personal opinions.
Okay, now at this
Yeah.
point, this is 1:30, we're officially starting the indie comics panel. But we're gonna give a 2-minute break. If anyone's got a pee. Yeah, we're gonna give a break to anyone who has to go to the bathroom because we're just going to. Well, but thank you all for showing up. That was awesome. Ask a question in the next panel.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Come right back. We're only gonna be 2 minutes. Let's get a picture. Let's get a picture.
don't get paint on it.
Let's all get together for a picture. Let's get the kids in there, they're part of the panel. Sideways, yeah. We're gonna grab Travis.
Yeah, grab my bucket.
That's okay, only this.
Diversity in comics.
Yeah, move up, hurry up, come on.
It's probably an
I'm
iPhone.
treating you how I treat a fellow critter.
It's probably an iPhone.
Probably not.
Probably an iPhone. Another tyrannical organization, right?
Here's my comment.
I think he's just messing with us now. I think he took a picture like 5 minutes ago.
He probably did.
They're gonna shoot darts out at us.
He's just taking selfies.
He's like checking the news or what team's winning the game right now.
Good panel, no, thank you. Dude, I got your info.
Thank you.
They're
Oh
good.
my God, I'm not like
Thank you.
There's a camera right here.
Travis made it.